Hey guys, it's Pete from Pete for Anxiety here, the mental health podcast, breaking the stigma that mental health is talked about. Welcome in today's episode. Before we get started today, we need to cover a few things really quick. Let's talk about the Pete for Anxiety Patreon first off. It's only $1, guys. $1. What does $1 get you? $1 gets you into the exclusive episodes I am recording currently. I'm actually focusing on certain different diagnoses of things to show you guys what it actually looks like as it manifests in a person. So why not for $1, judges? Yeah, they said $1. I just checked with them too. See, they said it was okay. It was $1 anyways. Let's also talk about the Oracle Talk Radio Networks app. In case you can't be here live listening to me, watching this video, supporting the show, you can listen to it on the radio app. Why not? It connects us live to our 365 radio. Just go to your app stores and download the Oracle Talk Radio Network. You'll see the big old Oracle Talk Radio Network app logo right on there. Download it and it'll connect you to me, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, to Pete for Anxiety when I'm live doing my thing right here, informing the world and raising mental health awareness. So where are you going to be? 10 a.m., of course. Come on, we just talked about this. Pay attention for once. Damn, do y'all know how to listen? And as always, guys, like, follow, and share the YouTube channel. If you guys like what you're seeing, leave some comments, man. We want to know. I want to know if you like what you're on. You want to be on the show? Let me know. Hit me up at PeteVersusAnxietyPod@gmail.com. And as always, guys, enjoy the show. And by the way, did I mention to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure because some of y'all are hard of hearing in the back, may have to yell loud or get a megaphone or something. But, anyways, let's get today's show started. Y'all have a great one. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome into another exciting episode of Pete versus Anxiety, the mental health podcast, breaking the stigma that mental health is really talked about enough. My guest today is a licensed therapist, 15 years experience, certified in EMDR, and a Gottman level 3, the one, the only, Nicole Richardson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
Doing great. Why don't you give everybody a little more rundown of your background, and maybe you could explain them what exactly the Gottman level 3 is exactly, because I'm even curious myself, honestly.
So Gottman is probably one of, at the risk of sounding like a weirdo or a fangirl, Gottman is one of my favorite researchers. I don't think that he would be upset with me sharing this. So he's still alive. He's still doing research at the University of Washington. And he got his master's in mathematics. And he jokes that he got his PhD in psychology because he couldn't figure out why he couldn't get a girlfriend. I think there's a little bit of a joke to that, and maybe like 10% serious. So Gottman and another fella completely changed the way we study couples and families, and it's been really revolutionary. They took it from, before Gottman and his former partner, we only used surveys. And so it was all self-reporting. And these two guys used a lot of math and they used a lot of science. And one of Gottman's sort of famous studies that he's repeated several times is he hooks people up to heart rate monitors, to blood pressure monitors, to perspiration monitors. And then he lets them have a conflict with their partner and he measures all sorts of stuff. And so the Gottman method or modality really came from over 30 years of his data and research collection. And so I'm not certified in Gottman, but I'm level 3, which is the tier just below certification. I don't know that I'll ever do certification, but that's what that means in a very high level.
That's interesting, though. That's how he does that, though. I mean, you can think about it. I mean, science and math and all that kind of stuff kind of go together anyways, hand in hand. Honestly, if you think about it, you break it down to that level of stuff, But that's interesting, though. What got you into that exactly?
Oh, gosh. I read a little bit about his research when I was in grad school, and then I just totally fell down a rabbit hole. I was like, well, this guy makes sense. He's got all this empirical data, and I really like his method and his training, and the stuff that he encourages people to do makes sense, and it's very approachable. So he's authored or co-authored over 40 books. Some of them are for clinicians and some of them are for like normal human beings. One of my favorites is 7 Principles for Making a Marriage Work. And he's even said he wishes that he had titled it like Making a Relationship Work instead. So even if you're not married, I love that book because there's kind of a workbook style to it. It's very approachable for, again, like sort of normal human beings who just want to get better at communicating with their partners. My second favorite is When Men Batter Women, which is a very, very heavy topic. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a beautifully written book, and it's based on his and somebody else's research on men that batter women. He's not suggesting at all that women never hit men, but the research he did was explicitly on men that batter women. And it's a really, really good book. I think the first chapter is like 11 myths about battered women. So if you are in an abusive relationship, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it until you're out. But if you love someone who's in an abusive relationship, or if you are recovering from an abusive relationship, I personally thought it was amazing to have a man write a book about, yeah, you're not lazy, you're not less than because you didn't leave the first time he hit you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really incredible. So those are two of my favorites of his, and those are both written for, again, normal people, not clinicians.
I think it's going to be interesting to read. Honestly, I do think when you get a male's perspective, especially that subject too,
Mhm.
it's funny you say that because I read a book that was about breast cancer that Erica Newbert had wrote, and she said the same thing to me. She was like, "It's interesting to hear a male perspective to these things," because she was like, "Well, she said when she first pitched me on the show, I was talking to her a little bit. I was like, I know this is a little weird. I said, but I'm interested to know more." And she was like, "Well, how about I send you a copy of this book to read? What do you think?" Okay, I'll read it. Why not? What's so wrong about it? I'm the type of person I'm just going to jump in straight feet first, and I already know reading it, and it was actually really good. It obviously didn't apply to me 100%, but you was watching the journey of this woman is taking to this, and she said it's so interesting to hear a male's perspective to it because she said that she's had males reach out. I've read the book that now they understand better what their loved one is dealing with, and I was just like, well, why not? That's my thing. And I think it's interesting when men talk about certain topics like that, especially that one, like you said, with all that kind of situation. It's just interesting to get a perspective on the other side of it. And I think me and another guest, Betsy Holmberg, we had a conversation about, how men and women think differently, like men have this tower-like system and women have this kind of like need to want to be fit in with each other kind of thing, and it's interesting as well too. So, and I just I thought it was interesting when you said it because that made me think about that whole situation. So
Absolutely. Well, and I think more men need to be part of the conversation. I mean, if we're going to talk explicitly about domestic violence, more men
yeah,
need to be part of that conversation. Again, I'm not suggesting that women never become violent, but honestly, statistically speaking, men are more of a threat to women than the other way around, and men need to be part of that conversation. So that book definitely isn't just for women. But again, if you're currently in a domestic violence relationship, I would not recommend. It's just too rough of a read. But
yeah,
if
no, I get that
you're someone
completely.
and you're struggling with why haven't they left, it's the perfect book.
Yeah, it's better for the person looking on the outside inside to help them out versus that person reading it. Yeah, I get that completely. And that's interesting though too, but that leads us into our topic though that we decided. Me and Nicole decided we're going to talk about how do you talk to kids about subjects that are really hard, just in general, because just so people understand, these kids as early as 4, and I don't know, Nicole could probably back me up on this one. I know about at 4 years old, they start understanding topics way better than we realize. They may not be able to tell us, but they know what's being said around them. They're not stupid. And a lot of these kids, it's like, I don't think people realize that a lot of these kids pick up things on an early age, man, and they know what's going on. They could read the room better than most people realize.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, you could start just as an example, you can start with just nonverbal cues.
Hmm.
Roughly 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So tone of voice, my volume, my hand gestures, I gesticulate wildly, body posture, right? If I'm leaning over you versus if I'm sitting next to you. Kids understand that intuitively, just like adults do. And there's been an interesting study. I wish I could remember who was doing it, but interesting study published not too long ago about they had kids in the room with their primary caregivers, and all they asked the primary caregivers to do was to raise the volume. And they had the kids hooked up to several different measurements, including heart rate, perspiration, all sorts of stuff. And what they found was the kids started to respond in their bodies with stress, even if they continued to kind of play on the floor and do their own thing. And even though they were not involved in any sort of conflict. And even if the content wasn't necessarily hostile, when parents raised their voices, their kids' bodies reacted.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense though. You think about it, because if you get upset around little kids now, they tend to like go, okay, well, time to leave the room now, and they'll run off or whatever else. And they notice, like you can notice a change in them, like depending on how you approach them. Like if you're leaning over them,
Mhm.
okay. No, if you go eye to eye level with them and say, hey, listen, and I do this with my stepdaughter now. I just look at her and go, hey, listen, I go like this, and she looks at me, and I make sure she's looking at me, and I talk directly to her. She tends to respond a lot easier than me, than someone like yelling at her, because she's not going to listen. She hears you yelling, she gets scared, and obviously going to run off. But if you talk to her and you just kind of talk to real straightforward, and it seems to work real well. Hey, listen, I need you to go pick that, and you're pointing at something like, hey, I need you to go pick that up right there, and she'll go and do it. Versus like if you were to yell at the kid, they just take off running.
Well, right. Or if two adults are arguing,
Mm-hmm.
kids can either leave the room. That's one potential response. Another response is to go comfort one of the parents.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting sort of painful dynamic as well. You know, if even if you are not necessarily raising your voice, kids, again, they can understand tone. If they don't understand the content, they can still understand tone. They can still understand and read body language. And so it's interesting to watch when a small child goes and comforts one parent or the other, or maybe I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but I think it's kind of cute when like the videos on Instagram or whatever, when a dad reaches for the kid and the dog kind of nips at them and says, no, like I'm protecting this kid. And it's interesting to see sometimes children will do the same thing. If, you know, one caregiver is being hostile towards the other, it's interesting to watch, you know, a third response instead of comforting, but then potentially going and swatting at or pushing away the aggressive caregiver. There's a lot of different potential responses based on the kid's age. Obviously, the older they get, the more likely they are to just want to remove themselves from the situation, but they're still going to have an opinion about who's wrong and whose fault it is, who started it. And that can absolutely impact your relationship with them later. So I don't know how old your stepdaughter is, but if she hears you having a conflict with your partner and she thinks it's your fault, I can almost guarantee that she will either be afraid of you later or she will absolutely be mad at you later.
You know, she's 4, and the thing I've learned is that, like, if I'm gonna have a disagreement with her mom, we walk away, or I get upset, I'll
Mhm.
walk away and come back to the conversation, because she can tell a lot of times. So, and me and her mom have joked around. We were joking around, arguing about something. Just and you'll watch her come and go, stop, stop,
Mhm.
stop. She just gets in the middle of like a referee. All right, y'all need to break it up, kind of thing. And starts telling us to break it up, and we're just playing around or whatever, And she doesn't understand, but she understands. She's like, to her, it's like we're arguing, but we're really we're just me and her just joking around, kind of thing. But yeah, she's bright for 4 years old. I'm going to tell you this much: this little girl for 4 years old is very intelligent. She
Mhm.
knows a lot more of what's going on than most people realize that she does, and she can pick up on a lot of things. And you can't talk to her like a normal kid. If you, like I said, if you make eye contact with her, ask her to do something, she'll go and do it, no problem. And we're teaching her how to be self-dependent on things like that. She cleans up her own plate at dinner time. Okay,
Right.
I'm done. So I'll go clean up and things like that, and put it in the sink. And and we always positively reinforce it too when she does something really good, and tell her, hey, you're doing good, and things like that too. And I really don't think we have that many problems arguing with around her. Honestly, like I said, we try not to. We avoid the whole situation. If it gets to that point, we'll stop the conversation and do it another time when she's either asleep or she's not there, because she visits for the weekends and things like that, or she hangs out during the summer with me and stuff like that. But it's like we're very careful how we go about it, because like I said, she's really quick to pick up on things, and
Mhm.
she knows what's going on. Like you said, when the tone of voice raises up, I'm a real loud person sometimes, and sometimes she gets a little scared. So and I gotta remember sometimes when I get too excited or I get too loud, it does kind of scare her. But at the same time, she's not really like fearful, because I think she's starting to learn a little by little that I'm just a loud person in
Mhm.
general, and I'm not being aggressive towards her. You know what I mean? So it really doesn't get her to be afraid of me really at all. But I really don't, like I said, really don't have any problems with her, honestly. Like when it comes to that, she's really well mannered and things like, you'll obviously run into the problem where, she'll be a little stubborn, but I mean, that's all kids do, that kind of thing. It
Also
happens.
humans.
Yeah, exactly. we're tiny little humans. They like to argue with us. So I mean, it's like, sometimes she'll tell us no, but then and it's different because when the aspect of a step parent, because it's not your own kid. Because I raised my three daughters differently than I did her, and it's weird because I'm not really affectionate person when it came to little kids like that, just because at first. And this one, it's a little different. She's more affectionate, so now I'm having to learn how to be a little more affectionate with her than I was with my own daughters and stuff like that, dude. But that was just the way I was raised, the same way, kind of. My dad and I were not really like super close, but we were, he was there. He told me, recently he's been telling me he loves me and things like that. It's just tripping me out because usually when we were kids, he'd never say that to us, kind of things. But he wasn't really home too. He was gone a lot of times and stuff like that as well. So it was a little different for me.
Well, a little different and a little not. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like you just made a really good point about a lot of times we parent the same way we were parented, whether we realize it or not. And I've run into a lot of clients that are like, well, I think about my mom or my dad and I just do the opposite. And that's not always the right solution either. So I find that most people, not everybody, but most people generally fall into one of two categories. I end up parenting just the way my parents did, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? But there's usually pros and cons to that. Or I just kind of do the opposite. And what we want sometimes is something a little bit more in the middle, something that reflects more of what we want our kids to learn. And, our kids now are growing up in a different time with different risks and that kind of thing than we did. So, what might have worked for your parents may not work for you as a parent. And that doesn't mean that your parents did a terrible job or whatever. It's just, even technology has changed the way parents have to parent. And that's not because our parents were idiots, but like internet wasn't in every home until I was probably in middle school, high school. So it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. So parents now absolutely are talking about, okay, well, how young is too young for screens? And then when we talk about screens, at what age, right? And then what should be on that screen, what shouldn't be on that screen? How do we help them interpret that? Which just wasn't really a thing when I was a kid.
No, God, no. I'm thinking I grew up in the 90s, man. Internet was AOL, and that was pretty much it then, and just like we knew very little about the internet at that point. Now you've got like TikTok, X, all the way down to pretty much everything you can think of at this point. So many different sites, so many ways to access the internet, so many things you can do. Heck, even playing online for us was still a new thing. We didn't get that until sometime, I think early 2000s, right there. Sometime when some of the later models of systems that came out and stuff like that, and now it's like you have to worry about these things as a parent because these kids get on the internet and you don't know who they're talking to, because now it's like, okay, now you're going on a game like Roblox and you have these weird people that are on there doing weird things that, not a lot of people think anything of. These kids obviously don't, because they're kids. They don't think about these things. I start asking, hey, where are you from? And start asking these little questions that don't really add up for them. But for us, we're like, well, hold up. Wait a minute. You're not asking this kid where they're from. And, oh yeah, what does your mom and dad do? Things like that. Like, yeah, I don't think so. Sorry.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot of where there are prey, there are predators. So if you as the parent are not familiar with whatever the platform is, I can guarantee you're not aware of what some of the potential risks are. And even if you are, there's risks that you may not be aware of. There's a podcast docu-series or whatever, investigative series that I listened to about TikTok. And one of the examples they used was there was I think she was a first grade teacher. When TikTok was relatively new, this first grade teacher told all of her students, first graders, the first couple of weeks of school, hey, I want you guys all to go home and ask your parents to get on TikTok so that you guys can exchange information basically and keep in touch outside of school. Well, so they do that. And two of the kids got, I don't know how to say it in a G-rated way. They were approached by predators and convinced to provide basically child pornography.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting perspective now. Okay.
Yeah. So these, first graders who, the parents don't know any better because, again, TikTok was new. The parents weren't on it, and they thought it was safe because their kid's first grade teacher told them it was safe. And I'm sure she was well intentioned, but
Yeah.
she didn't fully appreciate the danger she was putting her students in, and it kind of spiraled from there. And so now there's a child who basically he took a bunch of selfies of himself and he gave it to this predator, and those photos will never be fully off of the internet.
Yeah.
And it's just terrifying because that predator went and sold them to other people.
Yeah, it is. It's really weird though. I mean, and let's get into that first conversation. How do we talk to kids about that kind of stuff? Do you have any suggestions of like okay, so here's a scenario I ran into. My younger daughter, she's the oldest of the three, had run into this problem. She had posted this video and it was like something about she was in a towel or something. It's like you can't put that out there. I'm like, you can't.
Mhm.
She's like, why, Dad? I like it. It was the most uncomfortable conversation I've ever had to have with somebody because she doesn't understand. I'm like, sweetheart, you can't put that out there because boys, they don't know how to act right. It's what I told her. I'm like, and it's true. Because like if you go on there, some of these girls, even if they fall in the category of pretty, this is an interesting conversation I had with somebody earlier, actually. It's this morning when I was at work. A young man was talking about how his cousin had disappeared. She's 15 and ended up in a whole nother city than where she's at now. And I was like, listen, man, I said, the real possibility is that she's 15. She falls into that kind of cute for 15. You don't know what happened. She could have got trafficked for all you know. And that's the scary part of it all. And he's like, oh, don't talk like that. I'm like, I'm not talking like that from the aspect of like, I'm interested in the 15. I'm talking the fact she fits into the profile characteristics of what they would look for the type of people they're trying to get to just lure them in to whatever they want to do kind of. And I'm like, I don't want to be the, be the bearer of bad news, man. But it's like, you may need to look at the real possibility that you don't know what's happening or what this girl could be into. And the endless possibility of things that could happen at that point.
So what's it? Yes, that's a real fear. That's a real risk. I definitely hope that she's just
I
hiding.
hope so too. Yeah, honestly, I really did. I told him, I said, listen, man, I hope she just ran away. I said, but the real possibility is you got it. Me and another person had talked about this because I didn't talk to him directly, but I was talking to someone else. And I was like, you don't know. And she was the first one to say this was a female coworker. And she was like, the first thing she says, like, yeah, man, if she falls in that category, you never know what she got into from that point.
So a bit of a misconception. The average onset, or I'll say that differently. The highest risk age group for sexual predation is between ages 7 and 13.
Okay.
So absolutely, I'm not saying that over the age of 13 you're completely out of danger, but if you think about the age and stage of development between 7 and 13, kids are it is maybe a bit easier to convince the average child that if you tell I'm going to hurt, if you tell somebody that I'm hurting you, then I'll hurt that person that you tell.
Okay.
So your first question was like, when and how do we start talking about this stuff? And a lot of it is kind of understanding the basic developmental stages and what kids can and cannot understand. Kids are learning about trust as early as 0 to 6 months. They learn that they can trust you or not when their needs are getting met or not getting met. And that's the foundation of whether or not a kid learns to trust their environment. And that's mind blowing for most people. But so, you said earlier, like, obviously my stepdaughter understands more than she has language for. That's absolutely true. So if anybody who's curious or listening Googles Erik Erikson's stages of development, Erik Erikson's the first one to come up with it, and it's been proven over and over again, but it gives you sort of this rough sort of timeline of what kids can understand in each stage of development. So as early as a toddler, so potty training, you can start to introduce concepts of privacy. You can start to introduce concepts of what is this and who touches me here? Now I'm just pointing at my elbow, but that's a game that I encourage people of little kids to play with to play with their kids, because it should be easy to talk to your kids about what's this and who's touching me here. And if you touch your backside, what's this and who's touching me here? Your kids should be able to name their anatomy one of the reasons you want to teach your kids the proper names for their genitals is if, heaven forbid, somebody does inappropriately touch or worse your child, if they, at least in Texas, this is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
If you're under the age of 5, you can only be interviewed by a specialized investigator 3 times. And if you don't make what's called an outcry, meaning you said, child X says, John Doe touched my genitals and I didn't like it, right? That's what they would legally call an outcry. If after the 3rd time the kiddo isn't able to say what happened in a way that say a jury would understand, then that kid can never be interviewed again. And imagine how awful it would be to absolutely know that your child was harmed and to not be able to bring that person to justice, to not be able to prevent that person from hurting another child. So you want your kids to know what the proper names for their genitals are so that they can tell you or somebody else, hey, John Doe touched my penis or touched my labia.
Yeah.
And you want them to feel comfortable being able to say that. A lot of times when we're potty training, even when we're changing diapers, we can avoid the names of kids' genitals because in our minds, right, genitals have a sexual connotation to them. We don't ever want to sexualize our children, or healthy people don't ever want to sexualize their children. So it feels weird to call it a penis or a labia or a vagina, whatever you're more comfortable with, right? But that's what it is. And so being able to talk to them about, oh, I'm going to clean your vagina now. This is how we do that. When we're giving them their diaper, we're not accidentally sending them the message that this is a part of your body we don't talk about. And I've never seen a parent call a nose something other than a nose. Oh, you've got a runny nose. Come here, let me clean it up. If we practice at treating a runny nose the same way we would at cleaning up somebody's backside, if we talk about it the same way with the same amount of ease and as little anxiety as humanly possible, then we're going to send our kids the message that there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, my butthole hurts.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, I mean, you're right, Jim. It's what it is. It's what it's called. You're not really talking to it in any weird sense. You're not sexualizing it. You're basically teaching them this is what your part of your anatomy is. I mean, they're going to learn it either way. Some point they're going to learn it. It'd rather come from you, and you explain it to them in the right way versus, the internet teaching them, because God knows what they're going to get into these days. They can click the wrong thing and they're on a pornography site, and then you're going to have to explain to them what am I watching at this point? Well, and it's like, rather have the conversation now that you understand what right from wrong is, and I think it's an interesting aspect you say, like the anxiety of it too. I think it's just weird for people because it's like, you're talking to them about something way ahead of like we're not used to it. When we were talking to his kids, we didn't talk about it until sex ed. And I had to sit at the dinner table talking to my parents about what a penis was, and I'm like, it was just weird to us because my mom and my dad were having an actual conversation with me. And I was so embarrassed about it because they're asking me about it. And my parents were just being real. They're like, hey, listen, let's talk about this, And I could remember that day when I had to talk about it, man. That was the most awkward dinner for me ever. But at the same time, they didn't make it weird. It was weird because I made it weird because I'm a kid, It's like in my teens. I've been able to talk to my parents about sex, and things like that. And I was just like, not really the topic I want to talk about, but okay, but it was interesting because they did the same approach you said. They just talked directly about what it was. Like, listen, you know what that is? You know what this is? And they're asking me just straightforward questions. It wasn't any like goofy lingo for it. It was none of that other stuff. It was just a direct question. And it was so awkward just because it was like, we've never had these conversations until now. So like, if we start the conversation sooner, it won't make it so much weirder when it comes to having to explain that kind of stuff, and a little fun fact, like I had to raise 3 daughters of my own for a little bit. And let me tell you, Bells, I had to learn what a period was right off the bat, and it doesn't weird me out anymore as much because it was like, I was so like hypersensitive about it because I was like, that's a female thing. I want to give them their privacy. It's like I panicked when she told me, Dad, I just had my first period. I was freaking the hell out. Y'all would have been laughing at me because I was freaking out because I'm like, I don't know anything about this stuff. So I was forced to learn a lot of this stuff. So now I get it. I understand how it works a little bit, and look, I had my mom there to help me, talk to the granddaughter about it. But it was like,
I didn't make it weird. I just said, okay, well, here's your privacy for this stuff. This is, when we had got a bigger place, I said, okay, this is your bathroom. This will be your space. Here's a special trash can for all your stuff you need, just so you have your own things. And her sisters were like, why does Alexis get something different than us? I was like, well, because she's becoming a woman, she needs these certain extra things. It's just to give her a little more comfortable. And I try to make it as comfortable as possible. And of course, she's like, Dad, you're making this weird. I'm like, well, I don't know something to talk about this, kid. I don't know what to tell you. I'm trying here, man. I'm like, I'm having to learn all new things here. This will be a boy. It's a different situation. I'm better equipped for this, but I don't know much. So I'm kind of going off what I know at this point. So
I think that's a shame too. I remember as early as elementary school being kind of segregated, like the boys and girls being separated.
Yeah.
The boys got to go, and I actually still have some resentment about this. The boys got to go out for a recess, and the girls had to stay inside so that we could be introduced to kind of the highlights of like, hey, you could get a period and these are the things you might need. And I remember being so mad that I missed playtime, and like, why do they get to play and we don't? But I think that's and that was at a public school. I think that's another sort of cultural failing. Like, I'm sorry, but I think that periods are a human thing, not a girl thing. And
I agree with you now, honestly, Nicole. I agree with you now that it should be discussed. I think I think the boys should learn and the girls should learn the opposites. That way they both understand the anatomy better. I think the way that you said to talk to them about it is just, you're just normalizing it. These are all things, people's anatomies, and I feel like I could tell you now, after I've learned all that it was weird too, because it was like they made it so secretive. It's like, then you're all wondering, it's like, why not teach each other so we know what it is, so it's not an awkward conversation for people.
It just doesn't need to be this big, awful, dramatic thing, right? Like it's no less normal or natural than sneezing. And so the fact that you and other boys in our generation were completely separated from that conversation. I don't know if they still do that or not, but I think that's a shame, because the older you get, the more I don't want to say the more curious you are, but I definitely had boys asking me inappropriate questions in middle school, for example, about tampons. And you're like, that's, first of all, it's gross. Second of all, like it's an inappropriate question. And third, like, you should just know this. If I have to know this at this age and I have to deal with it and ouch, my cramps, you should at least have to know it.
Well, I think it makes more sense if you think about it. That way they understand. Like, they're not like wondering, well, why is, Nicole acting kind of weird, or, have a little more sensitivity to what it is. I think that, this whole macho persona thing is a little overplayed nowadays. I think now is the time to start educating everybody on the same things. Like, we're all adults, man. At one point or another, this is going to be a conversation you're going to have. Like, I was forced into the conversation, and it was weird for me, because when we grew up, it was way different. It was all secretive. You didn't know anything about it. You had no idea what that stuff was. You didn't know half these other things were, all these feminine different things are, and it's like, now it doesn't bother me, because that whole stigma about, when you go to buy like tampons for your better half and things like that, it was always weird. Me, I was like, okay, I'll just go do it. I don't care. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'll go buy them. And it was always weird because their mom at the time would make it so weird when she's like, well, I need you to go get something for me. And I'm like, okay, what do you need? Just tell me what it is. I'm like, I don't understand a lot of this stuff. Educate me a little bit on what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. And like, I'm calling her, I'm in the aisle calling her, asking her, hey, listen, is this what I need? I'm not really sure, because I don't know, I don't know which ones you need. And now it's like, now I can go down there, no problem. I know exactly what I need, because I could tell you, just tell me what you need. I'm out the door. I'll be there, But that was always so funny, because we'd always make it such a weird conversation, and it's I think, like, if we start teaching them younger, it'll be better in the long run, because it won't be that weird conversation. We won't have that awkwardness that we have with a lot of us of the older generation now. It's like, oh, I don't talk about that kind of stuff. I'm a man. I don't know about those things. Okay, sorry that you don't feel like you want to be educated. I don't know what to tell you.
Again, to me, I feel like it's a little bit like men educating themselves on domestic violence. It's if you care about women, then I'm not saying that men need to have a deep dive and be able to,
Yeah, no, I think being educated in the subject, you're right, is a very good point, though.
But to have a high level understanding of what happens, and that there's an Instagram account that I think is both sad and hilarious. I think it's called Roe v. Bro or something like that, Bro v. Roe. And so this gal in a purple suit goes around and asks men about basically female anatomy, the female reproductive systems. And it is meant to be kind of half silly, half like, really, when men don't know how long a cycle typically is. What is how many eggs does a woman produce in each ovulation cycle? What is an ovulation cycle? And it's just normal. It's normal, healthy biology. And so having even again a high level understanding that it's just science. you don't have to track your partner's periods, but maybe just have a basic understanding of how her body works could be cool.
Yeah, and it'd be a better understanding of how things work in general, like, hey, you can tell, like now I can tell, my wife will tell me certain things like, hey, I need this or that. And I'll just have a regular conversation with her. Like, it's not even weird to me anymore. It used to be real awkward. I get real weird about it. But like I said, that was the way we were raised. Like, we were just like, it was made to be just a taboo conversation. Now I'm like, let's talk about it. Why not? Like I said, I read that book about breast cancer. People are looking at me weird. Nicole, you should have seen the looks I got. Well, I'm reading this book. What are you reading? It's called The Mastectomy I've Always Wanted. And they look at me like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's a book about, someone going through breast cancer and they're having a mastectomy and her journey to come back to feel like a real woman again. And he's like, looking at me and he goes, what? I said, yeah, man, it's a book she gifted me. He said, hey, would you read it? I said, yeah, why not? Free book. I'll check it out. Why not? And I was like telling them about it and they're just looking at me strange, completely, like their faces turning pale. They're like, huh? You're reading this book? I'm like, yeah, man, why not? Why the hell not? Like, what is so wrong with reading books, Especially it was a good book. I mean, you got a better understanding of what someone going through breast cancer deals with. And it's a better understanding of a state of mind. And a couple of gentlemen had reached out to the author herself and told her the same thing. Like, hey, now I understand exactly more things, and it's like, well, what's the problem with that? It's funny to see people's reaction when you start asking, just like that woman around asking a question about female stuff, and their looks on their faces are priceless. Well, I don't know, they get that general macho man. I don't know what it's like. Why, dude? Why we make it weird? Why are you making this so weird? I think that's the great thing. And it applies to mental health too. Think about it. How many guys, talk about this subject? Not a lot of people, man. It's crazy. Like, all these people make these little catch videos, but then after that, it's like, where's the real conversation happening? It's not. Most guys won't talk about their feelings or don't be emotional and things like that. I had a death in the family on Monday and I was broken up about it. I'll tell people firsthand, I was crying. I don't care. I cried and I was upset as somebody really close to me. I don't care. You think I'm less of a man? I don't know. I don't really care what your opinion of me is. Honestly, I have emotions. I don't know what to tell you. You take her to leave it. It's there. It's called being human at the end of the day.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you so much.
I think there's still very much, I think particularly for men, this idea that to be the most masculine is to suffer in silence or to not suffer at all or to pretend that you're not hurting around anything. I think there's a lot of pop culture tropes, for lack of a better phrase, right, that still reinforce this idea that if you're manly, you look a certain way. If you're manly, then you don't talk about certain things, and you do talk about other things. Like, you do talk about your car, you do talk about how much money you make, you do talk about all the women that you have sex with. But you don't have, I used to joke that men are culturally allowed to have 3 feelings, well, maybe 4, hot, cold, and itchy. We could add horny to that one. Maybe angry
too.
So
true. It's so sad but true. It's so sad but true, though. You're hitting it on the head. If you think about it, a lot of these guys and all these different things they see and all these different personas of guys on TV, it's so interesting how they perceive everything, like the macho man and everything like that. Oh, if you're not super badly like me, then you're a wuss, and it's like, not really, man. It's called being in tune to your feelings, and ain't nothing wrong with that. Or they're always perceived as the sissy. Oh, you're the sissy because you have feelings and stuff. I'm like, not really. It's called being human. At the end of the day, you learn, you have emotions. Like, why avoid them?
Well, and you end up avoiding them typically at your own peril, right? It ends up backfiring one way or another. I mean, I'm just sort of from a cultural curiosity perspective, the Andrew Tates of the world are fascinating to me.
Yes, there you go. Yeah,
there's a real cognitive dissonance around his reality versus what he espouses. And then two, there's a real confusion, I think, especially for young men who maybe don't have someone to look up to, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's a mentor or something, then it's easy for someone like an Andrew Tate to come in and kind of fill that gap. And so I think he's dangerous in so many different ways. But I think there's a reason why Andrew Tate and people like him have amassed a bit of a cult following. And I think there's something to that. Not that I have all the answers. I absolutely don't. But I'm sad for the young men that follow him and think that, and men like him, and think that that's a good reflection of being a man and masculinity. That's sad. That's disappointing. But it also makes me wonder, like, well, who are they looking up to instead? Like, who's the alternative? Who's the healthy alternative? And not that there aren't any, but I just don't think those voices are as loud.
Yeah.
And that's being curious about as well. Are we? And I think when I say we, I'm pointing at women as well. Are we holding those men up and saying, "Hey, this is a good guy. He talks about his feelings. He's attractive." Because at the end of the day, that's an element of it. Men want to be attractive to women for whatever reason, right? Well, not for whatever reason, and whatever that looks like. And if Andrew Tate is trying to convince young men that he is very attractive to women, he's not, if any of them are listening, then that's going to make him all that more appealing, right?
Yeah, no, I get that. That's a scary part to think about it because what are these young gentlemen looking up to as their idol? Like, it's different back in the day. We had Arnold Schwarzenegger and all these other bodybuilders and things to look at and
Right.
different persona. Now it's like you got Andrew Tate and all these other idiots on the internet just spouting weird shit out to people. What is it? The UFC fighter recently, the guy who was on there saying that, oh, hey, well, by the way, Hitler wasn't a bad person. I'm like, what? Who is allowing these people to talk?
Right.
Like where are the people that are supposed to be regulating these guys talking? And it's like every time, and especially these guys that start doing like abusing women and things, it's like, guys, people see you doing this thing. You're in a spotlight, you're in a professional sport. You don't think somebody's gonna see you doing this stupid stuff? And then you're like, oh well, I didn't. It's like, no, dude. Like these younger gentlemen are going to see this and think, oh, that's okay. When I get a lot of money, I can slap around girls too, like the Ray Rice thing where he was beating on that girl in the elevator, or the P Diddy thing that just came out. It's like a lot of these things are coming out, and it's like I'm afraid of what these kids nowadays are watching because especially Netflix, man, they have all these different specials. The Jared Fogle thing that came out, the P Diddy thing that came out. The Nickelodeon thing came out with the whole vaccine of that whole kind of element of where that, the whole thing about that one guy was just doing weird stuff that was just to us was normal at the time. We didn't think of anything. Like, think of the cartoons we used to watch too. Like me and my wife were just talking about that the other day. Like, some of these cartoons, man, they're rated TV 14 now. And it's like back then that was just normal for us. Like we got away watching a lot odder stuff than now they do now. Like now they've really censored a lot of stuff and people wonder why. Well, go back and really watch it. Like Ren and Stimpy, like really watch what some of these shows amplify and things that they're showing. A Rocko's Modern Life is another interesting one too, because that one gets brought up a lot of times too. A lot of the real weird stuff they would do and things like that. And those shows, it's like we got away with it. And we even had Beavis and Butthead was another big one at the time too. And everybody's so shocked by South Park. I'm like, you think South Park was shocking? You should go watch some of the cartoons that we watched in the 90s, man. Half those things were just regularly accessible. They weren't on a special channel. They were generally accessed. You watch Nickelodeon, which was supposed to be for kids at the time. Hell, even, what is it? Are You Afraid of the Dark? Let me tell you, that one terrified the hell out of me as a kid. Mm-hmm. Like it was so storytelling, the elements of that. And it's like, nobody was censoring a lot of this stuff and they're talking about these things. And like nowadays, it's like now they have access to the internet. So God knows what they're looking at, Andrew Tate and everything else under the sun they start seeing, all these different people on there. Like just like all looking good, big muscular guys telling them that you're not a man if you don't do these things, and it's like, oh God, help us all, and it's.
Well, I think, and that's that. You kind of to turn this around a little bit. I think too that culturally we have a tendency to think of girls as being the primary prey for any sort of sex abuse. And it's true that by the time a woman reaches the age of 25, I think it's 24 or 25, she has a 1 in 4 chance of being assaulted sexually in some way, whether that's actual rape or some other form of assault. But it's actually much higher for men than I think most people think. It's 1 in 6.
That's crazy. 1 in 6?
1 in 6. And so something like 90% of women don't report their sexual assaults. It's even higher for men because of the shame, right? That men are supposed to be masculine, men are supposed to be able to protect themselves. And so there are a ton of men and boys that have been abused that bury it, that stuff it, that don't ever come forward, but they carry a tremendous amount of shame, a lot of trauma, and it's not talked about. So I mean, while we're talking about things that we're not talking about, right? Like it's if any of your male listeners are listening and that happened to them, they are far from alone. And there are nonprofits like RAIN with 2 N's, that absolutely have space for men. Even if you don't ever want to make an outcry and you don't want to go to the police, that doesn't mean that there aren't spaces for you to get support and help, and you are far from by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's great. Thank you so much for plugging that, because that's great for everybody to know where to find that kind of stuff. And that's what I bring such great people like yourself on here for. Is that way we can educate people about these things. And that's an interesting just topic alone. It's just 1 in 6 is still, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
Because we're taught usually it's women that are always sexualized, but men, it's crazier though. But when it comes to suicide though, it's men are less likely to talk about it too. Just like you said with sexual, being assaulted and things like that. That's the same weird statistic. It falls in the same category. Men don't talk about it, but they're more likely to commit suicide versus women that talk about it than commit suicide. Well, from the stats I was looking at, maybe a little different now, but it was an alarming number. That it was just like it's just crazy though, because we don't know if that could have been one of the cases too. Somebody that is struggling with something, maybe something happened to them, like you said, they don't want to talk about it or they feel embarrassed about saying something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's absolutely an epidemic in young ladies are committing suicide too, but there's been a skyrocket in the number of suicides and males in their late teens and into their 20s. I would call it an epidemic. I don't know if I know anybody who hasn't been touched in some way by a young man who's committed suicide in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
It's really, really scary. And again, kind of drawing a line with the Andrew Tate stuff, it doesn't feel like a coincidence that young men and boys are being drawn to people like Andrew Tate, who are clearly unhealthy, right? Unhealthy examples of masculinity and just humanness. And yet, all these young men are feeling isolated. They're feeling disgruntled. They're feeling alone. They're feeling hopeless, and they're taking action.
Unfortunately becoming a negative statistic is what I like to say, though. It's just it's hard, man. Fellas, if you're out there and you're having trouble, man, just to get some help, please. Don't feel like you're alone. Like Nicole said, there's plenty of options out there of people that can help you, and you don't have to tell anybody about it if you don't want to. That's great. But talk to somebody, please. Don't become a negative statistic and keep that number going even higher, because it's just like, there's so much available nowadays for you out there that you can get help somewhere, man. And it's just like, it's scary. And I think that's what really got me to the shock value. So I did an episode of Men's Mental Health on another podcast I was doing prior to this. And it was the numbers, man, were just staggering to me. It was just like, wow, this is insane, because I'm in that second most age range where a lot of that stuff was going on though. And it was just like, whoa, hold on, wake up now. It's a wake up call that, I think that's what first started me to get into doing this podcast. Was just like, I was like, man, ever since I did that, it was always in the back of my mind. It's like, man, that's a crazy statistic. Why are we not talking about this enough? And then when I started this show, I've been going through therapy in the beginning on this on my own. And I was like, well, let's see how many more people want to be a part of this conversation. So I shot it out as an idea. And here we are now. This thing is all the way out to October on just Mondays alone, because I do a weekly show Mondays. And I'm out to October of just people that want to come and talk about this stuff, and I'm putting together a suicide panel now as it is. I've already got a selected few, and I have a Dr. Kristen that's going to join us for the first one, and it's going to be an interesting conversation to have just, about it. and things like that. It's mostly a female one for the first one, and to be interesting. And I'm gonna try and mix it up as I go because I just try to get different opinions. But it's gonna be great to have somebody that's licensed that it's going to be in the conversation that can help some of these guys out if there's something they're struggling with or something. Just give them like some helpful tips along the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there are, I mean, you said it, there are free resources, whether it's the suicide hotline, which is
Mm-hmm.
national and it's free and it's anonymous, and that's great. And you don't ever have to tell anybody that you called. But there are also in most major cities, there's at least a handful of nonprofits that offer some form of free or very low cost counseling.
Yeah.
And now with telehealth being so common, even if you live more rurally, there are still going to be options. They might be harder to find, but definitely there are still going to be options.
Yeah, telehealth is really great. That's how I do mine. I don't like going to the traditional office, and I like it. I can access it from the space of my house, and
Mhm.
it's great, guys. Like, you don't have to tell people you're in therapy. I know a lot of the stigma behind that too is that people think you're crazy when you say you're in therapy. It doesn't make you crazy. And like, you need help. Like, if you need help, you need help. End of the day, like, you go to the doctor when you're sick. Why not go to the doctor when you're not thinking right, or you feel like you're in your rut or something like that? You're having these thoughts going through your head. And and I know it's a rough conversation for a lot of people. And I've had people contact me say that, hey man, I'm on the edge of this. And I just listen to them and I tell them, like, hey, listen, if you're feeling like this is getting to that point, I said call 988. Like, I'm telling you right now, you need to call them. Like, or or what did I was told on last Monday? We were talking, me and Darla were talking about. She said that don't let them get off the phone. Just keep them on there with you, and like three-way call them if you have to. Get them connected somehow. If they call you and talk to you physically on the phone, keep them on the phone with you, and three-way call the hotline number and let them know, hey, listen, we got a situation here. My friend here is having these kind of things, and just kind of talk them into transition, and then they're ready to take over for it, because those are the kind of calls they get, but it's just like,
It's what they do.
it's exactly what they do. It's a great resource, and things like that. And I'm like I said, I can't say it enough, guys. Like, we need to stop making these negative statistics. We need to start doing something now about this. We need to talk more about these issues. I mean, and it's the whole point of this podcast is just that, is to raise that question, to raise the conversation of like, hey, we're not talking about this enough, because these numbers just keep going up. As you just said earlier, they were going up in the younger teenagers, and it's like, we need to start now teaching these young gentlemen and young ladies like about a lot of this stuff, so they understand, like, hey, if there's a problem, we need to get you some help or someone to talk to about these things, so you don't, God forbid, you don't have to suffer in silence about some of this stuff.
Well, absolutely. I also think culturally, it's an interesting question for us to keep asking ourselves. What is our cultural dynamic not offering to young men? Or what are we suggesting? What messages are we sending them that
Yeah.
there's no hope? Because when the numbers are as big as they are, something's going on culturally. It's not, well, that was a kid who was having a hard time. Like, this is risen to a level where it's absolutely a cultural conversation. So I think us being curious about, so why are young men gravitating towards people like Andrew Tate and not someone else? Why them? And I think that's something we all need to get curious about. Because maybe there's something that we can participate in as far as a solution goes.
Yeah, and I think that's just a real question to start asking some of these young gentlemen, what it is that you like about him.
Mhm.
I mean, he's very confident in what he's doing. Obviously, that's a big grabber too. You like a guy with great confidence and things like that. Maybe it's the physique thing, and maybe it's just the way he does it. But it's like, I don't, and I don't know. Maybe it's just a lot of how some of them raised too, because everybody's raised differently. It could be the product of their environment and things like
Mhm.
that. And I think that's the real question, is that we need to start talking to these guys younger and figure out why it is that they seem to think that this is okay to act. Because Andrew Tate does it, I can too, kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, it's not really how it works, fellas. I'm sorry.
Well, he's going to prison, so like, he can't do it, right? And he's gotten himself to where he is by harming women, like a
Hmm.
lot of women. He harmed a lot of women. So he's going to end up in prison. There's a book. Oh gosh, what's it called? Um, I'm totally going to space on the name of it, but it was an interesting sort of statistical look on the cost of being in the drug trade.
Hmm.
Been out for a long time, but it was sort of an interesting, like, the idea of being a hustler and, being able to make it to the top and make all this money. And basically what it was saying was like, you're going to get murdered, or you're going to spend what little you make on your legal defense, because you're going to go to prison, and the government will absolutely confiscate anything and everything that they can. And that's if you don't have all of it stolen by some competitor, right? Literally
Exactly.
from you. So, I mean, at the risk of sounding very Pollyanna and that crime doesn't pay, to me, it's very, very much in line with the Andrew Tate. There isn't a quick solution to anything. If you want to be successful physically, then you have to go to the gym regularly. You can't go once and say, well, I didn't get healthy that one time, so I'm done now. If you want to be healthy mentally, you can't, go to one group or go to one therapy session and say, well, I don't feel better, so it must not work for me. You're not going to take one pill and say, well, I feel better, so I don't need to take any more. You're not going to go to work one day or take one class and, man, you're wealthy, you're done now. Everything that you want, you can have, but you have to work for it. And it's not going to happen overnight. And it's probably not going to happen in 6 months. It's going to take a lot of time and effort and energy to get there and then stay there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what the problem with these what are these pyramid scams are like. Oh, you can get rich just by doing this. I'm like, no, you can't, man. I can't just start putting videos on YouTube and I'm going to make $1 million already. It's not how it works. It takes time. Ask a lot of these guys. They're in a lot of the spotlight too for a lot of them, And there's one guy I used to watch all the time. His name's King Scratch, and he does a lot of these like food review things. So he was real honest though. Like when you had him in a live chat room setting, he was talking to you about these things. And he was like, hey, man, he's like, I work constantly. He's like, don't think I didn't earn this shit just by, and he was real about it with people. He's like, and he said, with another thing with social media, it's like when you put yourself out on social media, it's like you put yourself under the microscope, man. He's like, you don't know how many crazy messages I get from people about just weird shit, threatening me and things like this and all these other things I do, and it's just because they don't agree with my opinion about something. And all he's doing is posting food reviews and things like that. And it's like, I don't think people realize, everybody wants to be the next big thing. Like, oh, I want to be a streamer. It's like, how many hours those guys put in? It's a ridiculous amount of screen time they're behind that thing playing it and stuff like that. And it's like, we all have these dreams or aspirations. We want to be the next pro gamer. Well, let me tell you, man, that's a less likely thing of happening, and for you to take off, it's like, you better catch it at the right time. Because if not, it's a lot of work that these guys go through, man. These guys will tell you where they started in the beginning. There was nobody watching them. Even these people on TikTok, like there's a couple people I follow. It's just like, I couldn't do it, man. I couldn't do TikTok as long as they do. They're like up all night talking. I'm like, oh, I couldn't do it, man. It'd be too much. Like, I feel there's just like too much obligation going on and things like that. And it's just like, oh, y'all are just too much, man. They'll be the first one to tell you too. Like they get the craziest things getting said to them. Like this one girl, I'm just sitting in her chat watching, and these guys are just saying the most wild things ever, and they're coming in there saying these weird things, and she's just rolling it off the chin. And she was actually on the show too. She was on the show as a guest, and it was like she was telling her story about stuff, and that was an interesting. Like just the roller coaster we were going on together. I was like, hang on, here we go, man. And it's been interesting since day one of doing this thing. Like in the first few weeks, I did an interview with a Columbine shooting survivor. Okay, Nicole, and she was in the library about maybe 6 feet away from one of the guys that were committing the act as it was happening. She could see this guy's whites of his eyes. So I'm assuming she's about 6 feet away from this guy, give or take, she's under the table. And I'm like, oh shit. Oh God. And I'm in a dark room, by the way, and I'm recording this. I had a situation come up where the internet wasn't working. So I had to think fast. So this is why I'm in a dark room, but I'm visualizing this thing, and she's just painting the story for you. And I'm sweating bullets here. Like, oh God, is he going to see us? Is he going to see us? I'm not in the situation. This person is telling us about this actual event she went through. And it's been crazy since day one of doing this thing, but I've loved every bit of it though, because I get to meet people like yourself that just teach me new things and, different books I need to go read now. Apparently some stuff I'm missing out on, I need to go check out now. So
I think you said a lot there, right? It was a lot of really important stuff. it's important to listen just as much as you talk, if not more, right? And I think about absolutely everything you just said. There are a ton of those examples that you use where people were just kind of banging their head against the wall for years before it hit or before people started paying attention. I think that's just the way a lot of things are. And so now we get, there's an expression. It's something like, everybody wants my success, not everybody wants my hustle. Or
Exactly.
do the
Yeah,
work.
I think it's something like that. Yeah, something similar to that.
Forgive me, but you get the point, right? Like,
Yeah.
Everybody wants the win, but like I was saying before, like none of that comes easy and none of it comes fast. You can have it, but you have to do it, and it's going to be painful, and you're going to feel like you're speaking into the void for a little while before you get there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I could tell you firsthand when this thing first started to where I'm now, it's like, it's a lot of work. At first, it was a lot of work. Now I'm figuring a lot of stuff out because I'm new to podcasting. This is something new to me, and I've been learning things as I go. So this has all been a kind of a experiment for me, trying to figure out how things work, how to do different things, how to have better conversations with people. And I've as it goes, you could kind of see I evolved from the beginning to where I'm now. And I start learning things about myself as I go, which is really great because it's just like every time I hit click, it's a whole new conversation you're having with somebody, and it's hard for a lot of people. And I tell them, like, my recording schedule this past month was I was doing 2 a day, and people are like, 2 a day. I'm like, yeah, 2 a day. I was recording 2 hour long episodes a day, and it was just like, why not? I'm like, I have this thirst for knowledge. And even for me, that was a lot, and a lot of people are like, why are you doing that? But why not? I'm trying to get somewhere. And if I don't put the effort in now, like if I do half-ass, it's like these conversations wouldn't be happening. We wouldn't be having great conversations like we are now.
Absolutely.
I mean, other people, it's like you could tell when people are half-assing things, but it's been great having you though today. I really do appreciate you coming in. Do you want to go ahead and plug some of your social sites? I know you have a website, everybody can come check you out.
Sure. Yeah. So I actually built an e-course for parents that are struggling to talk to their kids about sex and sexuality. It's called The Talk Made Simple. You can find it at thetalkmadesimple.com. And if you're in Texas and you need a therapist, you can find me at NicoleMRichardson.com.
Awesome. And I'll definitely, I'll have to get the link for that, for the test for the parenting. I think it's really good. I'll put it in the description of the video for everybody in case y'all want to go check it out or stuff like that. And once again, thank you so much for coming. I enjoyed this conversation. It's great. It's great when people take time to come on here. I know, a lot of times you guys are busy doing other stuff. So I do appreciate you spending the time with me, having just a great conversation in general. Guys, as we get ready to wrap up this episode of Pete for Society, you guys pretty much where to find me. I'm pretty much on X all the way down to TikTok. I'm all the way on Spotify down to iHeartRadio. And I always say it costs nothing, absolutely nothing to be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could say something like, or hell, you can even make their day. I'm Pete for Anxiety signing out saying, don't ask how your day is today. Ask how your mental health is today.